Good evening and welcome to Kunsampayo Choling. We are so very happy to be here and to be sharing a teaching by Jetsama Akanamo. Tonight's teaching comes from 2005. The title is Tools to Deepen Your Practice. And so we will begin now.
Tonight I would like to talk, sort of continue on the same track that we have been going on since I've arrived, trying to explain in somewhat more depth some of the concepts and ideas that may have been tossed around in teachings or that you may have heard but not quite come to understand, firstly. And then secondly, for those of us who are playing music, and for those of us that have been practicing for some time, maybe these teachings hopefully will give you the tools by which you can practice more deeply. Because the depth at which one practices, that is to say, to avoid practicing in a superficial way where there is no mental or emotional investment. That's really not the ideal kind of practice. It's a little bit like maybe watching TV or listening to the radio or something like that, where you do it half a mind, and the rest of the time, of course, the mind is involved with other things. And so we've all heard that we don't want that to happen, that we want the mind to be gentled and stilled, but yet we have a hard time understanding that really the key to that is the depth, the level, and the absorption with which we practice. That depth or that absorption is called the Dakini's breath. That is actually what makes one's practice relevant, delicious and sweet, meaningful and nourishing. And without that depth and that level of absorption, it's very difficult to practice in any way that is more profound than, say, recitation by rote. And so that's the effort that we want to make. And so in order to do that, I would like to explain things perhaps a little differently, perhaps a little more deeply than you may be used to. One of the things that I would like to mention is that in Tantrayana, Vajrayana, the same thing, on the path of Vajrayana, which is where we are now, you could say that the path has two eyes or two legs, maybe two supports. But another way to say that would be that the path can be distilled to its essential nature in two words, and that would be wisdom and compassion. In fact, many of the tankas, those are the paintings that are all around, traditional paintings, one sees in those tankas pictures of a female and male in union, two lamas as consorts in union. And of course, having ordinary minds and being used to billboards and stuff like that, we think, oh, what is this? But we shouldn't look at those pictures with an ordinary mind because they have a profound meaning. And the meaning of the union between Lama and consort is the union of wisdom and compassion, or the union of emptiness and method. The union of emptiness and method is the perfect balance, the perfect ship by which to cross the ocean of suffering. It's the perfect vehicle. And of course, first we should understand, what does it mean? Emptiness and compassion, or rather, wisdom and compassion, or emptiness and method. What does it really mean? Well, the meaning is this. First of all, when it comes to wisdom, wisdom is something that you cannot arrive at by accumulating facts. Because facts are phenomenal, they are believed to be self-existing, they are part of samsara. Even if they're very smart facts, even if they're PhD style facts, even if they're MD style, no matter how many facts you know, you can never accumulate wisdom through the accumulation of facts, or what we would call the accumulation of knowledge. It's not to say that the accumulation of knowledge is not necessary. If that were the case, then none of us would need training. We would simply sit and do our best at meditating. Of course, facts are necessary. It is necessary for us in our practice to understand how it is that the preceding lamas and excellent practitioners, how they accumulated merit and how they accumulated tremendous achievement. It's tremendously helpful to know facts, for instance, about the great lamas and the great saints and the Buddhas that have come in this time and in other times, in order to understand what it is about them, how they come to be, and in order to understand with our ordinary minds. In fact, to some degree, our ordinary minds do require satisfaction. And that's where Vajrayana is ideal, because Vajrayana gives us mental food. We have visualization, we have mantra recitation, we have the absorption in emptiness, and then the springing from emptiness as the deity, and then the Vajra confidence and the Vajra pride. It's busy work. And sometimes when people who are used to just sitting quietly and doing this or whatever it is they do, whenever they have that habit of just sitting quietly, and actually there is a part of Vajrayana Buddhism in which you do sitting meditation. But if students only have that experience, they come here and they say, well, my mind is not calm. I'm reciting all this stuff and I'm really stressed because I can hardly pronounce it, and the tunes, forget about it. And so there. And of course, the response to that is that, well, really in Vajrayana, the task is not to calm the mind. The task is to awaken to the emptiness of all nature. To awaken to emptiness. In order to practice Vajrayana, for instance, there has to be some certain capacity that the student has, or some previous karma and comes to bear, or Vajrayana simply would not work. Indeed, for certain kinds of students, Vajrayana, because they practice very superficially, would be like just reading sutra, just reading it. You may glean some information, but you will never accomplish any wisdom that way. So, when we first come to Vajrayana, we are expected not only to read to learn how to pronounce, to accomplish the tune, but we also have to learn how to visualize. We also have to learn how to allow the five senses to dissolve into the sphere of truth, which is emptiness. And that means letting go of perception. And that's the first step towards meditating on emptiness, or rather, as we do in Vajrayana, dissolving or realizing the essence of all nature to be empty, and then arising from that empty nature as the deity or as a wisdom being. This is basically the meat and bones of Vajrayana, is that generation of the wisdom being by first dissolving into emptiness. And so when say a Theravadan practitioner, that's the early stages of Buddhism that Lord Buddha taught when he was actually physically alive. If a person who was studying Theravadan Buddhism, good, we're doing well. Easy for me to say. When a person practices like that, they are letting the mind relax, and they are using some kind of method like allowing the mind to rest on the breath, to simply breathe, to simply be like that. But ideally, when a Vajrayana practitioner prepares to really generate the deity, and they've done their taking refuge and all the steps that precede the promising, the bodhisattva promise, and all the prayers that precede, and they actually get to the part where there is the dissolution or the original view of emptiness. They are not, at that point, relaxing the mind. Because if we're simply relaxing the mind at that point, we're technically practicing Theravadan Buddhism. It's a little different. So, I mean, it's okay to start that way, but again, we're talking about going more deeply into our practice. And so, when a tantric practitioner meditates on emptiness in order to pave the way for the arising of the deity, what you really do at that time is to open up the senses, in the sense that the senses are grasping things. They see this or this. I hear that. I smell something. I don't know what it is. One of you guys. But not really, I'm just kidding. So just to keep you guys awake. So the senses are grasping things. The senses are actually the children of the original conscious assumption of nature being essentially real, or a phenomena being essentially real. And so the senses arise from that assumption. It's a chicken or egg thing. It's opposite than what you would think. The senses arise from the assumption of consciousness as being inherently real. And so the senses' job is to grasp. When you see, you react with, acceptance or rejection. I'm having trouble with words tonight. The exception, you have like an acceptance or rejection, or even a neutrality, which would be sort of a combination of both, or a decision not to do either. But there is that first knee-jerk reaction. And the same thing with all of our senses. We react to what we sense. The senses are really in order to keep us pacified in the belief that our lives are inherently real, that we are sitting on solid, that we are solid, we live in solid, and everything's okay. And that's what the senses are meant to do. They are meant to grasp on, in a way, and hold on to the time and space grid so that we can feel as though we are safe. Because we don't like that idea of emptiness. That's just troublesome. So when a tantric practitioner sits down to meditate, he has to take the senses and open them up. How can you do that? Can you visualize it? Well, you really have to go quietly in your practice and find out for yourself. It's very difficult for any teacher to tell you exactly how to let go of the senses or to let go of the attraction of the senses. Yes, we can give you pointers, but it comes down to the point really when you have to sit and you have to know your own mind. To know one's mind, we know how to deal with it. And it's like feeling our way around. Oh, we know we shouldn't go there because there's an object, and we know we should go there because it's okay. We're kind of feeling around. So when a tantric practitioner meditates on emptiness, he doesn't build emptiness. He doesn't make emptiness. He doesn't cling onto emptiness, which is somewhere else, and bring it here. Instead, what the practitioner does is to simply allow the grasping to solid phenomena and solid self-nature to be appeased. One relaxes. One awakens to emptiness. How does one awaken to emptiness? Well, of course, the first time you sit down and try this, you're not going to awaken to emptiness fully, because that would be like becoming practically enlightened in a very swift time, like very swift. And so you can't expect that. You must be patient with yourself and expect that this will take some work, that it'll take some time. When one relaxes the grasping, the difference is, let me see. Okay, if you take a crystal and and sunlight comes through the crystal and is reflected and refracted, and you see a rainbow. The rainbow is the same nature as the light that came through the crystal. In a way, what you're going to do is, if you're seeing a red ray and a purple ray and a blue ray or whatever color you're seeing from this crystal, you're going to, with intention, go to the heart of that color, as though you were peeling away the colorness of it, almost reversing it, putting it back through the crystal and understanding its source, like that. I know that's a little chewy, so you have to chew on that for a little bit. But it is very much like that. It is assuming that to be a tantric practitioner, in fact, you must have assumed the nature of emptiness. And in one's practice, that is what you do. You assume the nature of emptiness. So you're relaxing the senses and the grasping, knowing that you don't visualize emptiness, because when you allow the relaxing and the grasping to go, emptiness is what is. It spontaneously arises. And even that's a joke, because here I am telling you it spontaneously arises. And of course it's not possible. Because once it's it, then it isn't empty. And yet I say to you that this is the trick of it. That the more deeply we go into our practice, and when we take that precious minute before we generate the deity to really allow the senses to unlock, to stop contriving, to cease to evaluate, to stop giving you the food that you use to react, to simply let go. And your assumption there, and that should be your first assumption, that separate from this grasping there is the nature of emptiness. That, in fact, if we can pacify this grasping, then the empty nature is visible or knowable in some way. When it comes to gathering wisdom and come to understanding the difference between wisdom and knowledge, knowledge would be all the facts that you absorb from your text or from reading or from your teacher or from, tapes that you might have heard, whatever, that allow you to accomplish that letting go of the senses. But the actual opening the senses and relaxing them so that, like in a hand, if my hand is like let's see, I don't know what we got here. If my hand is like this, it's around something. There, the shape is defined. And here in your meditation on emptiness, it's more like this. Didn't break. It's more like that, just. And the hand is open. And while the hand is open, if it were possible for us to truly do this in a profound way, okay, it would be like this. It's in the Guru Yoga generation stage, in the shower of blessings. His great bliss flashes in the fundamental space of the 5 lights. That's it. If you could really read and understand that line, that would be so good. His great bliss flashes in the fundamental space of the 5 lights. Well, what are the 5 lights? They are the senses. While we are considering them solid, we can name them and describe them. But it says here, the fundamental space of the 5 lights. So the senses become fundamental space. Don't become, are fundamental space. And the trick is that when we are not grasping and reacting, the natural state of bliss arises. And so here they're talking about Guru Rinpoche, and they're saying his great bliss flashes in the fundamental space of the 5 lights. Such renunciation of the grasping of phenomena is implied in that line. Such renunciation, such accomplishment, and true understanding of what the 5 senses are. Because like the light coming through the crystal, they all arise from the fundamental bliss that is our uncontrived primordial nature. That's an amazing line. And of course, by going deeply into your practice, one would want to read again and again the different words that you're reciting in Tibetan in English so that you can really understand what it is that you're doing. So for a tantric practitioner, it's all about practicing the awareness of the fundamental sphere of truth that we habitually perceive as phenomena. It's gradually awakening more and more to that. And all the practices, no matter what they look like or sound like or seem like, are heading in that direction, are about that. So wisdom is then the accomplishment of the accomplishment of a state of such non-attachment that one realizes the emptiness of phenomena by simply, I don't know how else to describe it except to just show you that posture. Just because the same as your touch is bliss. The same as your smell is bliss. The same as your tongue is bliss. How has it happened then that we're so darned uncomfortable? How has it happened then, according to the Buddha's teachings, that so many sentient beings are revolving so helplessly in samsara, so lost, so unable to understand how to understand or how to awaken or even how to live virtuously so that in the future they'll be happy? How does this all happen? And really, Lord Buddha said it during the course of his actual physical life, when he said, all suffering arises from desire. So while you can say that the fundamental space of the five lights is the same as the five primordial dakinis, they are activity, not separate from the Buddha nature. And yet these five senses hold on to us. Well, we think they do, although we did create them. But they, with their grasping nature, they cause us, because we have this strong habitual tendency, to constantly react and act really neurotically because we don't understand. To be neurotic is to not understand the situation and to act inappropriately, repetitively. That's pretty much us. We do not understand the emptiness of self-nature, and so we constantly act differently. So, these five primordial dakinis that are your senses, and someday you will awaken to, are now, because we are clinging, because we have not renounced, because we believe in phenomena and we believe in the solidity of everything, and because we are really revolving in dualism, we would have to consider them like five nasty whores. Because they trick us, they seduce us. They say to us, come and play with me and I will give you anything. And when's the last time you got anything good from a skanky whore? I did not say that. But I did wake Richard up. No, you know, if you sit up front, you're going to get it. You know that.
I was told to sit.
Okay. You're still going to get it. Our five senses actually keep us in a constant state of inflammation. Because while we're grasping to the solidity of phenomena, we're constantly reacting. While we're constantly reacting, we're constantly acting neurotically, out of accordance with the nature of reality. And so we're being tricked, seduced. The senses have many tricks as front runners for our consciousness of duality. They like to trick us by building us up You know, we can see and hear things that make us feel very proud and make us feel as though we are worthy of praise. And, you know, we can arrange phenomena any way we want. That's the amazing thing about it. And it can become very seductive. We can absolutely crap out on our practice. And yet, with our five senses, we can manage to create, and our consciousness of duality, we can manage to create a scenario in which we're looking pretty good. We can wear the right clothes and have the right beads and, you know, we can look pretty good. And so that's the deceptive nature of the five senses. How difficult it is to understand that that which helps us negotiate around is actually the very nature of bliss. How to understand that the very clinging that we do so tightly that prevents us from awakening to the primordial wisdom state. How to understand that's the very, that the opposite side of that very clinging is liberation. Well, that's wisdom, and that is the kind of wisdom that we strive for as we practice. We see ourselves in a dualistic way. We have very concrete roles as to how that dualism plays out in the way that we procreate, in the way that we die, in the way that we're born. We have very exacting ways in which it plays out because of our belief systems, because of the system of duality. And we've had a long time to work out the kinks. So when we believe in physical reality as being essentially real, we can find all kinds of facts and information and people who will agree with us. And if you wish to avoid awakening to the primordial state, you'll have lots of friends. Because most everyone is locked into that confusion of the five senses. Like a dream. We know how it is when we're in a dream. We may, on some level, understand it's a dreamlike state, but the emotions are so strong. It just pulls us into it. A dream can be very sensual. It can be very alluring. It can be very stimulating in that you've had maybe dreams with interesting things that happen and interesting colors or something. But we've had all kinds of dreams, but we've had all kinds of phenomena as well. And the same lack of clarity, i.e. sleepiness, that keeps us from awaking promptly out of a dream that we want to awaken out of, that is the same heaviness, dualistic nature, clinging to phenomena that we have here that prevents us from popping into something else, which would be awakening, real awakening. And so when we practice, we have to know ourselves well enough to know what our particular problems are. You know, whether it's clinging is really the thing to me, or whether it's infatuation with my own brain. That's a big one. Oh, we love that one. Infatuation with my own brain keeps me from awakening to emptiness. But anyway, that's a terrible obstacle. That's a mean one. Oh boy. Because when you are getting ready to generate the deity, you cannot even allow the deity to arise naturally as it does from the wisdom of emptiness, or the wisdom that is emptiness, because your brain has a better idea. And that's unfortunate, because it is that wisdom that we need. We're not, here in tantric practice, Particularly with the Nyingma tradition, we are considered the ancient ones, the oldest. And they say, how many Nyingmas does it take to change a light bulb? Well, none. We all meditate in the dark. So we are the ancient ones, and we like to meditate in the dark. So in Vajrayana, what is the most precious capacity is that capacity to simply let go the thoughts, the conceptualization, the products of the five senses. You know, all the conceptual proliferations that we built around what we sensed. It is letting go of that. It is opening the senses to allow the view. And that is the wisdom that we really work on, that becomes the very foundation for any accomplishment that we have on the path. That's the foundation for it. When we are in love with our own minds, which is a lonely way to go, I have to tell you. When you are in love with your own mind, you can't believe that you're supposed to substitute anything for that stuff in your head, because it's so phenomenal. It's so impressive. It's amazing what you can do with neuroses. I mean, unbelievable. When you really believe in phenomena like a child, you can build it like blocks and do anything. But that accumulation of knowledge is practically worthless on the Vajrayana path when it comes to actual accomplishment. Sure, you need to learn a lot in order to get to the point where you're practicing. And so we do have to accumulate some knowledge. But when you really want to accomplish, it's wisdom you must accomplish. And that wisdom is pure perception, the view. Letting go of ego clinging, opening up the grasping of the five senses, allowing oneself to view the emptiness of space. Now, so what about the other leg or the other eye of Vajrayana, which I said was compassion or method? When we practice early on in Buddhism, like when Lord Buddha originally taught, he taught that we should do no harm, that we should never harm any being, and that was one primary level of vow-taking that we should all take. Now, in Vajrayana, there is less emphasis on pure, stark teachings like that, and more emphasis on something maybe a little bit more complicated. How can I put it? It's like this. When in Theravadan Buddhism, when you are accomplishing Dharma, what you are doing is purifying the mind and allowing the mind to relax. Okay? And that's a necessary step, a necessary stage. And part of that is to do no harm, to awaken to the realize that all sentient beings are equal in their nature, and that they all strive to be happy while not knowing how to be happy. And for that reason, we should have compassion for them. We shouldn't harm them because we know that each one has the Buddha seed. Now in Vajrayana, that is already assumed. Everything in Vajrayana is built on the layers underneath it. Like Vajrayana is built on Mahayana, Mahayana is built on Theravadan Buddhism. And they all become a little more fancy, explained, and mystical as they ascend. Like in Vajrayana Buddhism, for instance, we can expect that there will be practices in which there are wrathful deities. And we can expect in Vajrayana Buddhism, when you ask your teacher a question, you'll get a frank answer. Now, in Theravadan Buddhism, there's not the same binding to the guru. Your teacher is more like a companion on the path, who can, a teaching monk, let's say, can point and said, this, accomplish this, do that, do that, do that, and guide you and have encouraging words for you along the path. Whereas in Vajrayana, for the same reason that we accomplish wrathful practice, we sometimes have wrathful teachers. And we think to ourselves, how can that be? I thought Buddhism was the peaceful religion. I thought you guys didn't fight. Well, we don't. It's not what is happening here. When in Vajrayana Buddhism, the assumption is of the emptiness of all nature and the emptiness of dualistic existence. Therefore, I cannot find where I end and you begin. Who are you that you are different than I am? It's not possible. Simply because of the clothing you put on, the face you put on, simply because of the ideas that you have about self-nature being inherently real? Should I accept that? No. And therefore, in Vajrayana, we have very active kinds of practices. We have Vajrakalaya, who's like a pointy purba on the bottom, and he's tough guy, you know. And you practice Vajrayana, you generate Vajrakalaya when you want to remove obstacles. And Vajrakalaya can look very fierce. In one visualization, in his two hands, he's holding a purba, pointed knife, just like himself, and he's rolling it around, and he's looking really wrathful, yeah. And he's got all his wrathful clothes on, and he's got like sometimes tiger skins and elephant skins and human skins and all kinds of, and you think, whoa, what is that? I don't know about this religion. And that's because originally, like in the early stages of Buddhism, in Theravadan Buddhism, you want to relax the mind and purify the mind, do no harm, and the accomplishment is more self-oriented. Now in Mahayana and particularly in Vajrayana, we already assume that all phenomena is empty of self-nature. We already assume the truth of the unsurpassed primordial view. We already assume that all beings are essentially the same taste in their nature. We assume that. And yet we cannot assume that there is no phenomenal reality because we seem to find ourselves in it. And you can't go into a state of denial about it because, well, we could prove you wrong. I could just stick a pin in your foot and, boy, that'd show you. We find ourselves in phenomenal reality. We see the sufferings of the physical dimension, particularly the human dimension, which is like old age, sickness, and death. We see all these things. And so while we understand on some level the emptiness of phenomenal nature, and yet have not accomplished enough to be able to hold the sphere of truth so smoothly that there are never obstacles. So in that case, we practice the wrathful deities. The wrathful deities are active in phenomena And yet we assume their nature to be the same as the Buddha's, the same as our root teacher. And eventually, let's say if one were to accomplish Vajrakalaya as his or her root deity, eventually we would understand our nature as Vajrakalaya. And in fact, when we say that, well, the Buddha is the awakening, the Dharma is the method, enlightenment is the result. We can also say that the Dakinis are the activity of the Buddhas, and we can say that the protectors and wrathful deities are the active expansion of the nature and of realization. And we're practicing all these deities, and they're all arising from emptiness, and they all dissolve into emptiness. What we're actually doing is engaging facets of our own nature. So when you're doing protectors, let's say, and we visualize the protectors actually coming to the feast and partaking of the feast, are the protectors really coming from somewhere else and partaking of the feast? Yeah, in the sense that you came from somewhere else and came here. You did, didn't you? You drove, right? So in that sense, the protectors are coming, but are we also invoking that element of our nature that is the Dharma protector? Are we awakening to that very active, seemingly aggressive, very dynamic, very mobile element of the Buddha nature? That's what's happening. In the same way that you drove here, yet you are Buddha. They come here, yet they are you. Yet they are your nature, I should say. And so in Vajrayana, we are gradually waking up by knowing the nature of emptiness, then visualizing the seed syllable, which we understand to be some kind of primordial or primal display of the empty wisdom state. And then the deity with Vajra pride, with the hand implements and the attitude and the qualities. This is the display, the true display of our nature. So when you practice generating the deity, you should not be thinking of cartoons. You know, like here's the deity in front of me, everybody's amassed, all the clouds, blah, 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 boo, boo, boo. It's not like that. You don't visualize like that. It's a deep thing and it comes from within. You realize that that active Vajrakalaya, let's say, who's ready to cut through obstacles, or maybe Manjushri, the great sword carrier, the Buddha with the sword, cutting through the darkness of ignorance. Eventually we come to understand that this is our nature. And so that's where we are required to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Run through a practice is useless. Unless you're a stickler about keeping your samaya, and if you're doing it for that reason, you're a good person. But if that's the way you practice, we have to do differently. My recommendation is that we have to live and we need to practice. So how do we do it both? Well, first you have to prioritize, and then you have to think of your life in cyclic ways. When we are young, there are certain things we must do, but still we have to take time because soon we will be old. When we are middle-aged, it's pretty, there's more behind us than there is ahead of us, and so we better get busy, and yet still, in middle age, we are still very busy. Well, in old age, we have more time, but guess what? There's less time. So we have to think of our lives as being rather cyclic in that, let's say, you have to work for a certain part of, you arrange your life so that A certain part of the year you have to work very hard and very rigorously, but maybe you change something about your life, let's say, so that in the summer you can go into retreat. Or maybe during the Christmas holidays you can go into retreat. Or maybe find a way to fit in with your society and yet do accomplish Dharma. It's necessary to take some time for retreat. And group retreat is wonderful, but personal retreat is also wonderful. To know one's mind, find out in an honest and yet rigorous search. Where are my shortfalls? What do I really have to work on? Where am I lost here in my practice? To really take account and to go more deeply into the practice. That's what's necessary. Now, we talk about the two eyes of Vajrayana being wisdom and compassion. With compassion, when we translate bodhicitta as compassion, right there is a roadblock. And the reason why is because to us, when we are taught to be compassionate, we're taught that nice people are compassionate. As a society, this is what we're taught. That if you want to be a good person, you should help people. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. I wish my mother had taught me that. But, if you're going to teach your child something good, that's what you will teach your child, to be compassionate. And a good person is a compassionate person with integrity and all that kind of stuff. And that's a good teaching from your mother. That's a good teaching from your father, whoever you got it from. But when we come to Vajrayana, that thinking of oneself as a compassionate person can be a real pitfall. In that it's not hard to act like a compassionate person. And so you may convince yourself that you are giving rise to the great bodhicitta. Here it is, right now. Watch me do it. And of course, that can't be it. Because the bodhicitta, in fact, is only very loosely or badly translated as compassion. The bodhicitta is more like the arising or movement of the nature in display. The movement of the primordial empty state in display is like the seed syllable hum, or ah, or om. It is also like the deity, Tara, Guru Rinpoche, Avalokiteshvara, any of the deities. These are not solid forms, but we think of them as constructed of light rays. Remember the crystal analogy. Light rays, and the color is described as being gossamer. The color is there, but it's like gossamer, like a fly's wing, so thin, almost like a membrane, like that. And so, when we understand the bodhicitta, we must almost understand. I have to go back to something that I've heard in Christianity. I know I shouldn't do this, but I have to go back to it. So I'm going to. What did they say Jesus was in some of the teachings? The Word of God. In a way, you have to think of the bodhicitta that way. Like the movement or display of the Absolute. There is some small similarity there. Is if the Word of God means made manifest, then I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm not really a Christian preacher, but if that's what the teaching is, and that's what I understood it to be, then we have to understand bodhicitta in the same way. The absolute primal nature, which is undefined radiant luminosity, uncontrived, and its first movement. You cannot separate the emptiness of primordial nature from the display of the bodhicitta. They are the same. And so it turns out that if you don't meditate on emptiness and understand the nature of emptiness, you cannot give rise to the bodhicitta. You can be kind, you can display kindness, just the way the book says. Let me see, where's that? Nundro book. It says in the Nundro book that we should practice ultimate and ordinary and ultimate kindness towards all sentient beings. And we may think that's it then, that's it. But the truth of the matter is, in Vajrayana, while yes, it is assumed, once again, we do no harm, we are not harmful to others, we are kind to all beings, we have that assumption. But in Vajrayana, the bodhicitta is much more than that. The bodhicitta is the awareness of the primordial empty state and the insistence that there is only one movement, one display, and that is the bodhicitta. So, am I going to act kind? No, if I meditate on emptiness, there is only the bodhicitta to experience. And so the bodhicitta is actually the luminous display of the primordial empty state. We think that bodhicitta is something that we must practice. And yes, in order to build proper habitual tendency, that's what we should do. And that is the basis and foundation for the next level of practice. But this level of practice requires going beyond simple human kindness or even extraordinary kindness where we practice from life to death, in order to practice medicine or give out food or something really, some phenomenal contribution. But here, in the Vajrayana path, we must understand that you cannot create the bodhicitta. You cannot establish it, nor can you tear it down or destroy it. All you can do is deny that you are that. And you can do that from now till kingdom come, whenever that is. But you cannot deny the understanding that when we see, again, this fundamental picture we see again and again and again in Vajrayana of the Lama and consort in union. This is emptiness and method, emptiness and compassion. Inseparable. Functional as one. We can take them apart to discuss or to understand. But in truth, the bodhicitta cannot be separated from emptiness. And the true awakening to the bodhicitta comes from the fundamental view of understanding the emptiness of all nature. And so in Vajrayana, we are asked to accomplish, I keep coming unglued here tonight. We are asked to accomplish many things. One thing we are asked to accomplish is, of course, the realization of emptiness, the understanding of emptiness. We are asked to understand the arising of compassion as being consistent with the understanding of emptiness. And what we can't do is change that or build it or control it or anything by simply letting go of the idea of duality. The display of truth must surely arise, and that display is the bodhicitta. As a Vajrayana practitioner, we are willing to become super active, and so we're not shy about practicing those wrathful deities. We're not afraid of that. Maybe maybe as a practitioner we think we should be harmonious in our nature at all times, and very passive and perhaps anemic, and then Our eyes should be rolled ever skyward. But in Vajrayana, this is not the way. Vajrayana teaches us to walk in what we must walk in until we no longer have to walk in it, but with the view, consistent. The view being based on the understanding of emptiness. By that basis, it's easy to understand that when we meet the guru, let's say, in physical existence, then we can understand, yes, that is the arisal of the bodhicitta. That is the arising of bodhicitta projected into physical phenomena. But even there, we practice to increase our devotion and to habituate ourselves towards really utilizing the guru to the best of our ability. And yet here at the same time, if we don't meditate on emptiness, how can we understand that here in phenomena this extraordinary projection has happened and that is my nature? So in Vajrayana, everything is based on emptiness and the arising of its pure and only display, and that is the bodhicitta. And now we also see that, and in the Tanka pictures, it is the female that is the uncontrived primordial wisdom, and the male that is the method or the activity or the display. And so these are the two eyes or two legs of Vajrayana without which we don't know anything and we can't practice. So it's most essential to understand that. And that furthermore, as you go along the path, you have to practice the view. Now this gets really sticky too, because when we hear about what the view is, we go, okay. Then we start doing cut and paste. We say, okay, teacher is Buddha. Sangha is little Buddhas. And, and we just sort of translate it into different ways of understanding. And that's the kind of confusion that we get to. Because what we do is we say, oh, now here Lama has said something to me that I found confusing. But Lama is Buddha. Therefore, I'm so depressed. I'm so stressed. It's horrible. And then we get all neurotic and we start hating ourselves, and then we start hating other people, and you know where it goes. But that view must be preceded by meditation on emptiness, the understanding of the primordial empty state. Because if that is the basis of one's understanding, then one can accept that when the Lama says something, that is display, period, end of story. It's for us to either figure out or not figure out, get or not get, and it's okay. And we should understand that when we're visualizing, let's say, generation stage practice, and they say, here we have the celestial mandala, and the Lama is the deity, and the blah, blah, blah. All the view that we do whenever we're practicing in sadhana or receiving empowerment. So we have all these different visualizations, and indeed, I've watched people, and we are doing this cut and paste routine. Put a Lama here, put a Buddha there, put that kind of thing. And so what I'm saying is, we have to start with the basis of emptiness. And realizing that, without exception, there is only the uncontrived, luminous, primordial nature, and its only movement, its display. Once we realize that, it's not so hard. Because in the same way that I know that I'm acting like a personality, yet at the same time my nature is what it is. I know that about you too. I know your secret. I know your secret. And we can practice holding the nature. Holding the nature. And holding that view. But if it doesn't start with emptiness, it will seem like craziness. It will seem like you're trying to do something that's impossible. Pretend people are someone else. That seems ridiculous. And if there's anything in Buddhist practice that causes you to be a little crazier, you're doing it wrong. Because that is not the point. The point is to develop pure view, pure perception. If you could rest your mind briefly in the state of emptiness, and then feel yourself arise as the bodhicitta, if you could accomplish that, and then hold that and see anyone else, you can understand why it is that in Vajrayana we consider the welfare of others to be equal with our own. But without the basis of it being emptiness, there will be no such realization. We will have our instinctual survival, which keeps us on the time and space grid, plastered like flies. But when we, again, start with emptiness and realize the nature deeply, then we can begin to realize and have the view, and I see you as being that which is holy. I recognize myself in you. Oh, self, don't you hate that word? I recognize the bodhicitta in you. I see that. I see that you don't see it. But I see that. And this is how we have to practice. You build on one understanding, and then another one, and another one. In a way, the wisdom opens up like a flower. Through the purification of self-clinging, ego-clinging, which is accomplished by the awakening and practicing of the wisdom of emptiness. And if you're practicing in a fractured way, you got a little view happening here, a little bodhicitta over there, a little something over here. If you practice kind of in a scattered way without thinking this through from one level to the other, and realizing that it's all based on emptiness, and it's all based on doing no harm, and it rises to this level, and then it goes to the next level. And we have to realize that this is in fact the flowering of our own wisdom. Then we can begin to practice more profoundly. At first, Lord Buddha taught us all sentient beings are equal, and they are all suffering, and they all equally wish to be happy. And that was the first basis for compassion. Because this is how we were taught. Lord Buddha said, we are the same, we are the same. This is the same nature. Even the lowest worm or cockroach that you can find is the same nature. And so by that, we should do no harm. But again, Vajrayana goes a whole deeper level than that. We realize the primordial empty nature. The very gossamer breath that is the bodhicitta, and that is our true primordial nature. And slowly, slowly, we develop the view based on that. And so, I guess that's about it for tonight.
So thank you very much, everyone, here today, Wednesday, and we are happy to be sharing these teachings. This one was given in 2005 and was part of a series that she did on how to deepen. So I hope you enjoy them. They are all and will be uploaded onto YouTube as they're given, and you can watch them again there because it's a little hard to take in all at once. So thank you for being here for the teaching parts. And we just want to let you know that you are always welcome here at KPC. We're open. Prayer room is open itself from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. The, let's see, where am I? And the outside is open from dawn to dusk. So all of that is available to you. You're welcome to come in and use it and help deepen. And then for teachings online, we have Jetsama teaching on Sundays at 1 p.m. And then Wednesdays, the second and the fifth Wednesdays. That is because Kempo Tenzin Karze has begun teachings, and we have got his teachings to the public on Wednesdays now, the first and third Wednesday, and then he does a Q&A on the fourth Wednesday. So if you're interested in that, go on tara.org and do a search for Kempo Karze, and you will find him. And you'll find a way to register for all of those and to begin to receive his teachings, which are wonderful as well. And so we're glad to be having both of them. Meditation, we offer Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. Here at the temple and also on YouTube. Let me bring up that Kempo Karze's teachings are live and also on YouTube, where Jetsama's are pre-recorded, so they're just on YouTube. And then swinging down to Medicine Buddha, we have Medicine Buddha offered on Facebook every evening at 7 p.m. It's a very short and condensed version, and come on in and participate. Doesn't take but about 15 minutes at the most out of your day. Daily, we have a food offering ceremony in person every day. It's Zoom almost every day as well, and all you have to do is go to the calendar, which if you open tara.org and then scroll to the bottom of the page, you will find a link to the page with both the webcasts and tara.org there. So, and the webcasts and the calendar. And on the calendar, you can just click on an event and you will find out where it is and what the codes are if you need them and you know what to do. So that's there for you always. And the Sunday soak offering, if the weather holds for us, and we're getting into the weather that will, we will do it outside at the Guru Rinpoche statue. So come and join us outside. Otherwise, you can join us inside and stay out of the rain. But outside, and it's really wonderful to do it out there. That statue is really fabulous. It's a 13-foot Guru Rinpoche statue, and there's just nothing that kind of keeps you tied into that practice. So all good. Anyway, all these things are available to you, for you, and we're just so glad to have you with us and to be part of our family. So see you next time, and thank you again. Oh, and if you want to make a gift to Jetsama's to Jetsama directly, you can go to her PayPal account, which is jetsamagift@gmail.com. That's the email you can go there for, and you will be directly hooked up to Jetsama herself. So thank you so much. and have a great week.